welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Prem. I'm a senior marketing specialist here at Creospark. So let's start with the simple idea here. Copilot is already using your SharePoint content. Every answer it generates, every summary it creates, every document it helps draft is grounded in what already exists across your internet. So the real question isn't whether you have Copilot, it's whether your internet is ready for it. Because Copilot doesn't fix problems in your environment, it reflects them. If your content is outdated, unstructured, or hard to understand, that's exactly where Copilot will surface. And very quickly, user starts to lose trust in what it returns. This is where most organizations are today. They have invested in AI, but they haven't prepared the foundation behind it. And the foundation is SharePoint. In this session, we're going to focus on what actually drives success with Copilot, how your internet is structured, how your content is organized, and how intentional your strategy is behind it. Because when that foundation is right, Copilot becomes a powerful assistant. So let's get started. All right, so before we actually get started, I wanted to give you a quick overview about who we are. Creospark was founded in 2017 with a dedicated focus on Microsoft technologies, helping organizations get the most value from their Microsoft investment. Today, we have partnered with more than 750 customers across industries, backed with 7 Microsoft Advanced specialization that demonstrate our proven expertise in modern work, security, and Azure. Our leadership team is made up entirely of Microsoft MVPs or former MVPs, bringing deep technical knowledge and real-world experience to every engagement. With headquarters in Toronto and Davis, a team of over 120 professionals, including more than 35 technical delivery specialists and over 100 years of combined transformation experience, we have the scale to support complex projects while still providing a personal, customer-focused experience. Our services are closely aligned with Microsoft go-to-market strategy, allowing us to deliver end-to-end solution that helps our customers modernize, secure, and optimize their business. First, we have modern work. We help organizations improve productivity with Microsoft Copilot and AI, create engaging intranets and portals, and modernize collaboration using Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Whether it's complete migration or enhancing the employee experience, we can help. Second, we have Secure Cloud. We strengthen your security by managing endpoints and mobile devices, implementing governance and compliance, and building secure Azure environments with solutions like Microsoft with Windows 365, Azure Virtual Desktop, and backup and disaster recovery. Next, we have process transformation. We use Power Platform, Dynamic 365, and AI to automate manual processes, build low-code applications, and provide better business insights through Power BI and Microsoft Fabric. Next we have managed services. We provide ongoing IT support with fully managed desktop and endpoint service, 24/7 security monitoring, and financial analytics to help optimize IT costs while maintaining secure environment. We also offer ongoing maintenance and support. Our relationship doesn't end after deployment. We continue to support your customers with licensing, user training, cybersecurity guidance, and flexible support services to keep your Microsoft environment secure and up to date and also running smoothly. All right, before we jump in, just a few quick things to help you get the most out of today's session. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A panel at any point of our session. We'll keep an eye on them as well. We also have some useful handouts prepared for you, and so make sure you stay with us till the end of the webinar to get free access. Plus, there's a webinar giveaway, so definitely stick to around that for that. You'll also receive a certificate after attending today's workshop, attending today's webinar session. And don't worry if you miss anything during the session. We'll send a full recording to your email next week as well. All right, let me quickly walk you through what we will cover today. We'll start with what's changed, how intranets are being used today, and why they're feeling less effective despite high adoption. And then we'll look at what's actually happening inside most environments, the reality of content, attention, and how AI interacts with it. From there, we'll break down why this matters and how your SharePoint structure, content, and governance directly shape outcomes. We'll walk through what a well-structured AI-ready internet looks like and the pattern we see across high-performing organizations. Then we'll cover where most teams struggle and where things start to break down. And we'll finally we'll share practical steps you can take to start improving right away. And by end of the session, you will have a clear understanding of where to focus first and how to move forward with confidence. All right. Well, before I carry on, I wanted to quickly introduce myself and your speakers of the day. My name is Prem. Again, I'm a senior marketing specialist at Creospark. Diana, we have here from our team. She's a business analyst, and we have a guest speaker as well from Fresh team, David Bowman. He's a product director with Fresh Internet. I'll pass it off to you for introduction, David.
Hi, how you doing? I am David Bowman. I'm the product director for Fresh Intranet. Fresh is a SharePoint intranet product that we've built to help internal communicators, people managing intranets, to effectively deliver that service within the Microsoft ecosystem. Can be a challenging platform to deliver intranets inside, and we've taken all of the experiences and expertise that we've been building over the last 20 years to help deliver a compelling, engaging, useful, valuable intranet solution that maximizes the benefit that organizations get from SharePoint. Three things I think that we do primarily for organizations. Fresh creates a boundary inside of SharePoint, separating the intranet content and information from everything else that exists in SharePoint. Still useful, valuable content, but it gives the people that are managing the solution kind of clear definition and a boundary for them to scope and manage, and that improves search, improves analytics, and as we're going to see today, improves the answers that organizations are getting from AI. Lots of additional features, functionality, search, analytics, newsletters, integrations with AI to improve the employee's digital experience, and a host of additional tools that we provide for the team that are managing the intranet to, for want of a better description, keep the content fresh, to keep producing a valuable, engaging intranet and have lots of tools at their disposal to be able to do that. And of course, doing that in the safety and security of the Microsoft 365 environment. Everything that we do ends up in the customer's environment. I'm going to begin this first section of the presentation kind of pretty high level, zooming out, looking at internal communication strategy, intranets, and content generally. Earlier this year, we created a report. There's going to be a QR code for this report towards the end of the presentation. And, we really created this report off the back of lots of conversations that we had with internal communications professionals on the booth at events, in demos, in discussions, in conversations with people that were responsible for running intranets. And what we really heard was challenges on the two sides of the world that they operate in. So on the side of the employees, struggling to get employees to consume content, low adoption and consumption of messaging, narrative. And on the other side, with the kind of key stakeholders, the people that hold the budgets, hold the decisions, hold the influence in the organization, often wanting to communicate messages that, the internal comms team generally know aren't going to get a high amount of readership. So struggling on both sides of the equation here. And what we're recognizing there is this is a common challenge without really any common language. So we felt that the report provides that common language, structure, definition, and shape to a challenge that we saw people struggling with. So the report helps to identify some of the key communications challenges, particularly in the age of AI, because it is affecting how everybody works across their organization, and hopefully provides some design levers in the report that help address some of the challenges that people have been describing to us. So I'm going to bring in some of the stats, some of the data points. This was based on some surveys that we did, both with a group of internal communications professionals in Northern America and the UK, and groups of employees, the people that are receiving and consuming the content on the other end in both of those regions. So, kind of first data point here is that it's something that it can be uncomfortable to read, not something that lots of people like to talk about. But in our survey, what we found from the employees and the people consuming the content, 12% of them were reading internal communications in full. And I think it's a good place to start. Rather than thinking about AI, rather than thinking about Copilot and SharePoint, I think it's good to have this as a kind of grounding message. And in conversations with people in internal communications roles, I think people already understand this. This hasn't been news for a lot of people. It's not a new problem. I think the challenge that a lot of people maybe don't necessarily see yet is that AI is going to make this problem worse. It's going to make it more visible, and it's doing that quite quickly. AI as a technology does have a tendency to make good things better and make things that are already challenging slightly harder. So what are employees doing instead? So 83% of the people that responded in our survey were reporting content overload. There's too much content that they're being sent. 95% of the respondees said that they trusted AI summaries. Now, employees aren't skipping this content because they're disengaged or disconnected from their organizations. They're skipping it because there is simply too much. And AI feels like a reasonable shortcut. And we're seeing this in the data points back in our survey. So employees are using Copilot, they're using ChatGPT, Claude, other AI tools available. They're using these similar tools to summarize the communications that they simply don't have time to read. It's not a failure of culture. This is a rational response that people are having to a volume problem. Now, maybe this is fine, maybe this is okay. I think the challenge, though, is what happens when the summaries that employees are reading are wrong. So one of the key themes that came out of the report is this idea of the intent gap. So the intent gap is the distance between the narrative message that an organization publishes and the thing that an employee understands about that message. Now, AI isn't closing that gap, it's mediating it, and it is adding a new failure point. Now, this challenge existed in the before times, right? Before AI was around, and that variant of it is still alive today, right? In the form of kind of team managers, organic communications, where the team manager is the primary point of communications for their team. And what the internal comms team in those worlds are trying to do is cram messages, information, some of it complicated, some of it with a lot of nuance, into somebody that doesn't have a lot of time themselves to be able to consume those messages and pass them on to a wider group. So this intent gap in the world of AI makes it harder to close because now you don't have any visibility into how your content is being reinterpreted before it reaches the person that acts on it. In our manager scenario, you could have a conversation with them. You could look at the notes that they're using in those meetings. That isn't the case anymore because the person that's receiving the message, that could be a very specifically crafted message based on the prompt that they're using. So your message could turn into tens of thousands of versions of the same message. So Copilot doesn't distinguish between a carefully written policy page and a draft that somebody forgot to unpublish 3 years ago. It's not sure what's current. It's not necessarily looking at what's authoritative. Diana's going to talk about some of the technologies that Microsoft are introducing in her section. It isn't prioritizing this based on what you intended to be the definitive version. It is surfacing what's there, and it's doing that with a high level of confidence for people. So there's a kind of core misunderstanding here that a lot of organizations have when they're rolling out something like Copilot. They are assuming it's going to work like some kind of smart search that's finding the best answer. It's not doing that. It's working from what exists in your environment and often weighted by factors that don't have anything to do with your judgment of editorial quality or your judgment of the intent that you wanted that message to carry. Now, look, I'm very good at layering in problems. So, here's another layer before we start to kind of think about some of the solutions here. So most intranet content layers never really designed as this kind of cohesive set of content. They accumulate over a number of years. Pages get published and forgotten about. Policies get superseded but aren't archived. Content is duplicated across departments. Individuals saving things into their OneDrives. Copilot is treating that content as authoritative. Most organizations that I speak to recognize this challenge because there's a version of the intranet that was built with care some years ago, and then there's everything else that has arrived over time. The issue is that Copilot doesn't really spot the difference between those things. It finds outdated consultancy process on redundancy conversations from some time ago, and it is summarizing that with the same level of confidence as the current one. So here's another worrying data point from our report. And I think, one of the sort of sharpest findings, a kind of key paradox that we identified in the report. 95% of employees trust AI summaries of their internal communications content. They feel it is accurately capturing the key points of the communications. 92% of the internal comms professionals that responded in our survey were concerned that AI-generated summaries are distorting the intended meaning or tone of their communications. So this kind of, there's this distance here, and there isn't really any connection between the two groups where they're talking about it and discussing it. And that gap really is where risk lives for organizations. Employees are trusting the summary, communicators are fearing distortion. There's not really anything matching us in the middle. Now, very nearly all of our internal communicators professionals in the report are aware that employees are using AI to interpret their content. This is something that is known. Now, around a third of our respondees had a way of being able to formally monitor the impact that communications had. So not a lot of understanding about what's happening. People understand that this problem exists, but there isn't really any meaningful ways of being able to monitor the impact. So because of that lack of formal monitoring, we've got this additional challenge that we identified, the AI visibility gap. Now, content leaves the intranet, Copilot is processing it, an employee is acting on the summary, and nobody is really sure how any of that has happened. And we're calling this the AI visibility gap. Not a technology problem, not something that is particularly easy to solve with a policy. It is a consequence of publishing content without enough governance into an environment where AI is able to interpret it without context. Okay, let's think a little bit about some solutions, some the light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps in this presentation. We came up with this idea that subtraction is strategic. So the I guess one way that we've been thinking about this, people who've been talking about this report, is considering that the organization's attention as a budget. And that attention is a resource constraint like other resource constraints in the organization. And it's something that needs to be managed. And the idea of internal communications teams, intranet managers as being the allocators, the managers of this organization attention budget. And that having less content, better governance, clear scope, these are the things that are going to produce more reliable outputs from AI. Disciplined design rather than a retreat from content. So that, the kind of constructive way to think about this is the answer to this AI visibility gap isn't about publishing less and hoping for the best. It is about governing what we're publishing, defining a scope, and being intentional about the content that we're publishing. So subtraction becomes strategic when it is applied with a level of discipline. Because what does governed content look like to AI? So a very simple visual example here. A governed intranet workload is functioning like a high quality constrained corpus for AI. Clearer scope, structured content, defined audiences, consistent metadata are giving Copilot less to misinterpret and more to work with. Better governance is producing better AI outputs rather than thinner ones, because that's the kind of counterintuitive thing that happens there. When you tighten governance, you might expect that AI is producing thinner results because there's less content. The opposite is true. A smaller and well-structured content layer is giving AI a much clearer signal, And governed intranet content is the highest quality input that we're able to give to Copilot. Okay, three things that I want to leave this section of the presentation with then. Things to think about before we start getting into lots of technical details. Defining scope, auditing for liability, and structuring content for intent. So under scope, having a really clear understanding of what belongs in the intranet and what doesn't. And if something doesn't have a clear owner, doesn't have a purpose, it isn't providing value, it's not moving forward as an organization, then it does need to be questioned whether it has a place in the intranet at all. Now, I've worked with lots of organizations that have very small, one-man intranet, internal comms teams. And I think in those scenarios, having a kind of self-managed set of scope, you may not be being asked to create that scope or a kind of structured governance, but having a really good understanding of what you are responsible for in the intranet. And when someone comes and says something new needs to be added, is this something that you're inheriting or something they are now managing? And making sure that there is clarity about that in the intranet content becomes much more important when people are consuming this in other forms than browsing to it through a user interface. Auditing for liability, finding that outdated, duplicated, and superseded content before Copilot does. Tracking it down, removing it, archiving it, making sure that it lives in a different location. Really important to structure for intent. The architecture of messages becomes more important now than ever because we are creating them for two different audiences. Humans will carry on consuming content, but agents, Copilot, things that are being commissioned by the humans to consume the content for them. And those systems need much clearer intent on what it is that you're expecting them to do with the message. If something is sensitive, make sure that that is very clearly articulated somewhere near the top of the document. Increases the chances that that is going to be pulled out in a AI-generated summary. Okay, so look, there's a QR code going to be available in the presentation for the report. I hope that you find it useful. Really keen to hear feedback from people on whether it is helping them to say no to content that doesn't add value, helping them to kind of reframe this idea that they're responsible for managing the organization's attention budget. So I'm going to seamlessly transition over to Diana's section of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, just let me get this all sorted. Thank you, David. And so Copilot as a whole bypasses the intranet experience. The intranet itself within SharePoint or whatever you're using for, but the intranet was designed as a UI experience for the users. It was meant to be the designated place that was supposed to be easy to find your regular content, easy to find news, events, policies, department information, anything within your organization. It is supposed to be the one-stop shop dashboard experience to make it easier for people to find what they need, to get people on board easier, to get new employees in, to just be a consistent, immediate, reliable source of truth for organizations. And when it comes to Copilot and how it interacts with the intranet, it skips that interface entirely and just goes straight to the content. It goes to the data sources. It goes to the libraries. It goes to anything that the individual user has access to. It pulls all of that indiscriminately. All of them are just knowledge sources. It is a tool, and it is pulling in whatever it was meant to be pulling in. That means it is also pulling in any content that is outdated, any complicated content that you might have duplicated, any unknown content, anything. All of it is weighed equally. It is all surfaced with confidence because Copilot is just meant to give you answers, even if there is a gap in between. For some of the answers might not be correct because it's just looking at all sources as equal in whatever prompts that you're giving. So with bypassing this entire interface, trying to organizations spend years trying to make a perfectly good, reasonable, pretty, very easy, usable UI for their user base to be able to find all their information. And then Copilot just goes over all of that. So when problems arise with Copilot, it's not Copilot that is creating the new problems. It just exposes problems that were already there. It exposes any over-permissioning. It exposes any easily findable content, any not protected content. It exposes any duplicates, any redundant, outdated, trivial, what we call rotten content that's living in the organization. It just takes all that, goes past the pretty picture, the pretty user experience that users are meant to go to navigate, and then just goes directly to the sources and pulls everything out. And it might not be the best if the organization is not structured in a way that makes it most helpful. So digging back a little bit into the research earlier that David mentioned, it's like 83% of employees are already reporting content overload. Whatever structure, whatever organizational layout they're existing in within their businesses and their day-to-day tasks, they're already feeling overwhelmed by the amount of content that they have. And they're trying to look for just a reliable, feasible, easy solution to get what they need to get their tasks done. And so then with all of that, people are already feeling so overwhelmed that only 12% are reading like even internal communications. They're not even like fully reading through the I forget what it was, but had a client project where they were specifically wanting to know if they could get the analytics for if people read through a SharePoint page or like a news article completely to see like if people were actually reading in their organization what they were trying to push out. With all of this overload, with all of this content people are trying to stay up to date on, it can be overwhelming. And when people turn to Copilot to get these AI summaries, 95% are trusting those AI summaries to capture any key points, to get them summarized, to just give them an immediate answer for what they need in the moment so they can go about their day, so they can finish their task, so they can get on to the next thing, whatever has been pushed onto their table. And then with that, most people relying on or trusting these AI summaries, and then you have butting heads with communications professionals knowing that, hey, a lot of times these responses are not accurate. They need to be proofread. They need to have some sort of human oversight review. We don't immediately trust them. So then when you have that 95% being all gung-ho for it, supportive of all these AI summaries, and then 92% saying, hey, caution, flag waving, it causes some struggles. So you're in a situation where employees are trusting Copilot at the same time content reliability within the organization is weakest. So then you have an internal struggle in the organization on how exactly to go about that. And yeah, hopping into Copilot, most intranets were not built for this kind of tool, were not structured for this. A lot of times there's no clear, or even at times like just missing content ownership, no designated owners, or maybe whoever was an owner is no longer at the organization, and there was no internal review, there was no auditing, there was no content lifecycle processes to get things owned and handled. So now you just have content that's just free floating in your organization. No consistent review or lifecycle processes going on board. So kind of trying to find out where things are and who's in charge of what and trying to keep things up to date. It's difficult. Then you have, on top of content not being managed, duplicated and outdated content continuing to grow, because if people aren't finding what they're looking for, they're going to try and make it themselves. They're going to try to be independent. They're going to try to be self-sufficient. They're going to do whatever they feel like they need to do in the moment to get what they need. And then that's just creating more content in the organization that, again, Copilot sees as equal. And so then when it's sourcing, when it's bringing people back, when they're getting search prompts of whatever they're looking for, then they don't even know what is the original source of truth. What is the actual most up-to-date record? What is going on? And then content quality at that point is rarely measured, because if you're dealing with duplicates of information, of content, of files, spreadsheets, if you're looking at anything that's just redundant, anything that's outdated, anything that might be 2, 3, 5+ years old, if there's no audit reviews, if there's no content lifecycle, if there's no owners, if there is lacking structure, in organizations, the intranet is going to be lacking and not to be supportive of Copilot. So if you can't define, own, or measure your Copilot's not going to be able to interpret it correctly, and it's just a tool. It's just pulling in whatever people are asking for. So if they're asking for something that doesn't exist, or there's not reliable information or too much information, it's still going to be giving people what they ask for. And that's where kind of the content and reliability gap comes in. And then also falls into a trust problem within the organization. Already people are overwhelmed. Already people are distrustful. Already people are struggling. So then already struggling to find the reliable information that they need, and then trying to figure out if the answers that they're getting from this easy life-saving summary tool or task-saving, time-saving, resource-saving, hopefully is even doing all of that, is even providing reliable information. Search results remain inconsistent. All Copilot is doing reflecting those same underlying issues. So if your content isn't trusted, isn't structured, AI outputs won't be either. So having that trust in Copilot is directly tied to the trust in an organization's content, which is more work, which is more structure, which is more information architecture development, which is more than just thinking that an AI solution in your organization is just going to magically solve everything. It's not. There's a lot of underlying efforts because, again, Copilot's just going to be pulling everything that you have in and treating it all as equal. So it's not going to be fixing, Copilot's not going to be fixing any content problems. It is not going to do anything above surface level, above gathering and replying to prompts. It's going to surface what already exists in the organization, and some of that might be inconsistent. Some of that might be outdated. Some of it might be unreliable. So how is it going to be fixed? It's going to be fixed with better inputs. Better inputs is going to create better outcomes, is going to create the solution that people are looking for, the task-saving, resource-saving, reliable tool and agent that people are looking for. So Copilot is only going to be as good as the content it can access. If an organization has an intranet available and a user accessing things on the internet, or Copilot pulling in information from the internet, but they also have access to a development dummy data site that has similar keywords to everything that's pulling in, if there's no separation, if there's no structure, dummy data content and reliable organizational information is going to be treated equally. And that is not good. That is not reliable. And that's just like the easiest example I can think of off the top of my head. But whatever structure is already existing is just going to be reflected in Copilot. So you need to design content that survives Copilot, that thrives with Copilot, or more so, Copilot thriving in a readily planned out, designed, structured environment with thoughtful content. So you're making your intent explicit with all of your content. What requires action? What needs to be done right now to fix some of these solutions? What is time sensitive? What is critical to trust? What sensitivity, what kind of high value, lower value information is in the internet that needs to be prioritized, that needs clarity? Is there any cleanup that needs to be done? Prioritizing the clarity of the content, the worth, the value of your content over the volume of it. Reduction will make it cleaner. Reduction will make it more reliable. Reduce noise in your environment by removing that low value content, whether it's redundant, outdated, trivial, not needed anymore. And structure that content so meaning is preserved when it's summarized. So reduce the amount of rotten data in the organization. If you reduce that and only have the reliable stuff left over, the relevant things, the critical, the higher value content, the I could list synonyms, but anything that Copilot pulls from these clean, reliable sources is going to give you those answers. Also, just clean up your environment and make it a whole lot better to navigate things. The intranet that works for Copilot is going to be the same one that works for the employees. So creating content and a structure where your Copilot, Claude, any other solution can thrive along with the user experience, along with the content, along with the structure, and a cohesive environment, a cohesive ecosystem. And all of it, a lot of it, aside from significant content cleanup, is going to rely on the structure, is going to rely on the information architecture, is going to rely on the permissions management, the access management, a lot of the nitty-gritty things other than what content is not rotten. Content is going to determine what is surfaced. Permissions are going to determine what Copilot can access depending on the user. And metadata, clean, reliable, readily available, usable metadata, consistent across the entire organization. Metadata and taxonomy is going to influence how that content is interpreted. Anything, all of these will go hand in hand and also just incredibly boost your environment in so many different ways, making your environment thrive for document management processes, content lifecycle processes, search experience, your Copilot experience, your Claude experience, whatever you're using. All of these decisions when it comes to content reliability, permissions and access management, metadata structure, taxonomy, all those directly shape what Copilot is going to be delivering to users. And so then talking about all of the problems, talking about what Copilot brings up that is all on equal level, all unreliable, all the horror stories, all this. So what does the good look like? The good is going to look like clear site and information architecture. SharePoint Modern relies on a hub structure. So it's just a bubble of all the sites that users in their intranet readily need, that's available for anything and everything. Having a clear structure of what goes where, what is owned by who, what content is where, what needs to be restricted, all of that, easy, clean layout. There's no subsite architecture anymore. There's no content hierarchies. It's all just what is labeled, what is owned, what hub is in, where is it organized. Defining authoritative sources. This is something that's been a little new, I think, within like the last few months within Microsoft, but there's now a new option for designating sites as authoritative sources, as authoritative sites within SharePoint. So what does that mean? You toggle, you make in the settings for some of these sites that this is where Copilot gets the main source of information. You can choose what is Copilot going to be sourcing from. So if you clean up your environment, if you have it with a clear site and information architecture, if you reduce the amount of rotten content in your organization, and you've got that all cleaned up, and then you just designate a single source of truth repository, that's already going to make making it easier. Design your content for clarity, proper naming conventions, proper usage of metadata, reduction of any duplicates or trivial or outdated information that exists there. Designing all your content to just make sure it's to the point, it's clear, it's direct, people know what they're looking for. And then having that ownership and life cycle established, having governance in your organization established, having definitive owners for sites, for your teams, for any content repositories, for any list, whatever is big that needs to be managed that people go to for a reliable source of information needs to have an owner. And a lot of times some organizations just want to push it on IT. I'm sorry, but IT is not going to be completely knowledgeable of everything that's going on in marketing. For example, they're not content owners of anything going on. They can be permissions owners. They can provision the sites. They can be in charge of that clear site and information architecture. They can be in charge of the metadata, but they're not going to be working with that data, with that content, like day to day. So it needs to go hand in hand. You can't just have a single owner for anything and everything when it comes to governance and all these technical decisions that are going on. You need to designate who is the content owner, who is the site owner. Some of those might be the same. Who is working hand in hand. And then a lot of it goes into the readiness aspect. You know what problems there are with your organizational structure, with your content. You're trying to get AI readiness set so you can just hit the ground running. You want to have all this planned out. And the biggest part of it is going to be structure. That's the first pillar. You're having organized, consistent, logical structure for sites, and your content being the second one. So the actual like files and what information that you have, what data you have, making sure that it's clear, current, trustworthy, and then the governance. So you have your structure, you have the boxes, you have your organization, but you have your boxes, and then you decide what content is going in those boxes, what information is available, and then the governance aspect: who owns the box, whose name is on it, who is moving it where, who's going to be owning anything within there, and also just making it sustainable and just having that confirmed life cycle in place. If someone no longer can be in charge of moving the box, who is going to take over for them? Having all of these rules, having all of this definition, having structure in place. And then a lot of times that's where organizations struggle, especially if they're really new to it. A lot of organizations will, if they're already struggling with no clear ownership for content, overlapping, duplicated information, unreliable information, if there's no one that they can turn to ask, like, hey, who is in charge of this? Oh, no one's in charge of this. How am I supposed to find this? Where does it exist? I don't know where it exists. Search isn't helpful. Copilot's not helpful. I'm just going to make a new one. And then you're dealing with more issues of rotten content, because it's just more of the same over and over and over again. And then sometimes governance exists in the organization. There are policies. There's concepts of policies that exist, but they're not enforced. So then you have an idea of who a site owner could be, who would be a content owner, who was the manager of a department, all of that. But then there's no follow-up. There's no follow-through. If they're in charge of that content and it's supposed to be moved to a new location and it's never moved, then governance existing, things written down, but it not actually being enforced, it not actually being followed, isn't going to help either. You can have all things planned out, you can have all things blueprinted, but if there's no enforcement and follow-up, then they just exist as concepts, and it's still not helpful. So then, looking at all the struggles, if you want to start with this, where do you start? It's a lot to get through. It's a lot to clean up. It's a lot to plan the structure. It's a lot to plan the ownership. But easy enough, simplified enough, is to, one, define what you own. Clean up. Mapping every piece of content that you are responsible for, or who is responsible for what, across sites, channels, formats. Identifying high impact areas. Where do most people go to? Where is the most high value information existing? Pinpoint the content that employees rely on most, and where there are gaps or confusion that is costing time, costing resources. Remove any low value content that is just making people more frustrated, making people more confused. Archive or delete outdated, duplicate, redundant pages, files, spreadsheets before they just continue to erode trust in the organization, just making things more and more frustrated. People don't know what they're looking for and what's reliable, what's true. They're just trying to get a spreadsheet done, and they're questioning their sanity. Next up, establishing ownership and review cycles. Getting the governance in place and have all this planned out. You can have all it mapped out, but assign a named owner. Set review dates for every content area going forward. Get an audit, even if it's personal, plan those reviews. And then align the stakeholder groups, align IT, align communications, any other business department. Bring all of the teams into a shared governance model. So content strategy is not siloed. Just have it consistent, reliable, repeatable, scalable, collaboration with an organization, so everything just works so cohesively and no one's getting headaches, hopefully. All right, and then what do you do with all of this? what you have all this planning, you have all this knowledge. How do you even have an idea where to start? But to get moving forward, looking for patterns within your organization, not isolated issues. If there's repeated issues, service tickets, just consistent problems with people not being able to find some certain source of document content. I'm trying to keep it vague to keep it general for some examples, but look for repeated problems and not just like one-off issues. When you have something that's causing enough of a problem consistently across departments, across various different users, across stakeholder groups, handling that can make things a lot simpler. It can be a start. Start with the content layer. So clean up your rotten content, clean up anything redundant and outdated. Focus on improving trust. If you're going to have people that are so frustrated with day-to-day basic experiences like search and trying to use Copilot, you need to have that proper cleanup to start improving trust in these tools, trust in the search experience, in these processes that you're trying to build up. Align the content, the structure, the governance, those 3 pillars. And then build towards a sustainable model. Have something that you can repeat. Have something that people can trust. Have something that's easy to use, that you can easily review. Just enhancing those business processes. And then, yeah, key takeaways. Going into this, and I'm handing it off to Prem. Or am I taking this slide? Sorry.
You can pass it off to me. Yeah.
Okay.
Would like to go through? Yeah. All right. Just gonna bring David up myself. All right. Okay. So, key takeaways. All right. Let's bring this all together. One of the biggest takeaways from today's is content and environment are not separate efforts. They are the same projects because as you heard from Diana and David, no, because no matter how clean your structure is, if the content itself isn't meaningful or relevant, you're still going to get a poor outcomes. And on the flip side, even great content won't deliver value if it's buried in a poorly structured and hard to navigate environment. That's why success with Copilot isn't just about rolling out the technology, it's about bringing the content governance and technical architecture together. These two needs to work hand in hand. When they do, that's when Copilot can truly, really deliver on its promise. So if there is one thing to remember, it is this. The goal is simple. Ensure Copilot surface the right content to the right people in a right way that preserves meaning and trust. That's really what drives adoption and confidence in long-term success. And again, thank you again for joining us today. And would love to continue this conversation if you're exploring how to make this a reality in your organization. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide here. Questions. Just checking. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. Either Q&A panel. I think the session was straight good content. Thank you guys. Thank you, David. Thank you, Diana. We'll wait like a few more seconds unless someone is going to throw up a question. All right, I haven't seen any questions coming up. All right, how about this? I'll wrap it up then. All right, okay. As David mentioned earlier, there's a ebook by Fresh Internet that they did a lot of research on this. There's a major shift happening in how employees consume internal communication. They're not reading everything anymore. AI is summarizing it for them, which creates an internal gap between what you say and what they actually understand. This report from Fresh shows you why concise AI-friendly communication is now critical. Feel free to scan the QR code to download it and see what needs to change in your strategy. All right. Also, your feedback is valuable to us as it helps us improve our webinar and create valuable quality content for you all. To access the survey, simply scan the QR code on the screen. Your participation is directly contributed to our quality of our webinar, and you'll have a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card as well. Just going to leave. Oh, let's see. Just want to make sure it's not a question. Yes, thank you, Kunal. All right, once again, thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate your participation in today's webinar. Keep an eye out on your inbox for recording of today's session, certificate, and handout. We'll look forward. We really look forward to seeing you again for our next month's webinar session. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you, everyone.